Hello and welcome to the CPA Ontario Practical Experience webinar on Practical Experience for Pre-Approved Program Route PPR students. Key topics for today's webinar includes co-op students, rotations, external audit, and other common areas specific to PPR. I'm proud to introduce the two presenters for today's webinar, Farheen Merchant, CPA CA, and Hassan Tabakawala. Farheen is a CPA Ontario officer responsible for reviewing and approving your experience reports. She looks after banks, insurance and investment companies, as well as professional services and small firms E to L. With 10 years of experience as a CPA, she contains a wealth of knowledge in the practical experience field. Hassan is a CPA Ontario specialist, also responsible for reviewing and approving your pre-approved program experience reports. He has been with CPA Ontario for 5 years working in and around student services and has a vast array of knowledge in supporting your needs. Joining them is the Practical Experience team, here to answer any questions you have. Over to you, Farheen.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome everyone to CPA Ontario's webinar for students in the pre-approved program route. This webinar includes information relevant to all students in a pre-approved program and also specific requirements for students in a firm environment. As Beth mentioned, my name is Farheen Merchant and I'm an Employer Relations Officer with CPA Ontario. With me here is Hassan Tabakawala, an Employer Relations Specialist. We work with students to help them along their practical experience journey. We are very excited to host this webinar for you today. Now let's take a look at today's agenda. As you can see, we are going to start off with accessing PERT. For those students joining us who may be starting their first co-op term, or those of you who still haven't started your PERT reporting, this small segment is specially for you. Then we will move on to how to report any prior experience you may have, our expectations of you moving forward on your current experience reporting, and finally, your mentor review requirements. After we end our reporting segment, we will explain to you the difference between just reporting in your PERT profile and when to request for a profession assessment, meaning when do you send your reports to CPA Ontario for review. Finally, we will end with resources and a question and answer period. Please note that you can ask your questions using the questions button on the right-hand side of your webinar tool tab. You can ask questions throughout the webinar and someone on our team will be able to answer them. If your question applies to more than just you, we may broadcast the response to the entire group so that everyone can benefit from the response. Now let's go through the CPA student journey and Hassan will now lead the way.
As you progress through each stage of the CPA certification program, you will be able to choose a path that suits your learning style and lifestyle. It is also important you recognize the CPA certification program is designed to meet the needs of industry, government, and public practice by ensuring that all CPAs coming out of this program have the strong foundation of knowledge and skill as professional accountants to succeed in whatever role or position you take on. That is, regardless of the path you select to get you there. The CPA certification program includes the academic study portion, the CPA professional education program, or PEP for short, the common final examination, or CFE for short, and the practical experience requirements. The CPA certification program / your way means you have some flexibility, different options, and can make choices as you go through the CPA process. As you can see, the practical experience requirements are required to be documented and achieved throughout the entire education process. Once a student is registered with the body, you should get into PERT. Once you gain access to PERT, the practical experience reporting tool, your first step will be to create a profile. For most of you, your path will be the pre-approved program route. The first step is to ensure that you enter your mentor's information. That's the mentor email. It is essential that you complete this step as soon as possible, as your program manager will not be able to admit you into your pre-approved program until this step is completed. If you do not complete this within 90 days, you may lose the ability to claim some time as current experience. You will use the unemployed experience path for intermittent periods of unemployment or if you're switching jobs. It is extremely important that you keep your employment information up to date in PERT. If at any time you require more information about a specific task in PERT, you can always access the blue question mark seen at the top of the screen near the Create Profile header, and it will provide you with further guidance. You can also access additional help through the user guides found within PERT once you create your profile. These user guides are also available on our website. Once you have created your profile, you will be required to create an initial experience report immediately. To do this, you will click on Create a New Report. Once you have done this, you will see the screen shown on this slide. In this report, you will select Current Experience Report and select No for secondment. Enter in your training position, position title, and position type. Enter your average hours per week. Enter your start date, that is the first day on the job. Leave your end date blank. Leave the leave taken field blank. You will also notice on the top of the screen that there is a video link for PPR students on confirming your pre-approved program and the information that is vital that you enter accurately. It is recommended that you watch this short video before you create your experience report. Once you have updated this information, you will create the report and then submit the report. Once you have completed your initial report, you will see a screen like this. The next step is waiting for your program manager to confirm your employment. Once this is done, you will be notified by a system-generated email. If this is your first time in PERT, at this point you will get your per effective date and will be able to start reporting your practical experience. As mentioned, the per effective date, or practical experience reporting effective date, is the date in PERT the practical experience will begin to accumulate toward your practical experience duration. Experience accumulated after the per effective date is considered current experience, and any experience before the per effective date is considered prior experience. Once you have been set to in progress and have a per effective date set, you can claim up to 12 months of prior experience from your per effective date. You can go back up to 5.5 years, but can only claim 12 months of duration. This can be for multiple jobs, co-op terms, etc. Your per effective date is the date in PERT that the practical experience will begin to accumulate towards your practical experience duration. If you do not have a per effective date, your experience is not counting. However, once you have a per effective date, you can use up to 12 months of prior experience as mentioned. This would include summer students who did not register in PERT for their summer term and students who completed co-op terms without reporting. There is a semi-annual requirement for students to keep updating their PERT profile to ensure that you are on track to qualifying and to point out any areas where you may be struggling. This will help you in identifying if you need to change jobs, ask for more opportunity, and so on. Every 6 months after getting into PERT, that is setting your per effective date, you should create or update an existing experience report. This means you will go through the technical competencies and assess what competency level you are at based on the guidance provided and experiences you've had. Similarly, you will complete your self-assessment and documentation for the enabling competencies. It is important to note that there are several tools and resources available to you. A main tool being the Enabling Competency video located on the CPA Ontario website to help you step by step with your documentation. There is also a blue question mark icon on the right-hand side of each competency, which has the Enabling Competency grid that will guide you in what you need to demonstrate in your documentation for a level 0 versus a level 1 versus a level 2 proficiency. Once you have completed your assessment, click Submit. Your report will be set to Verified. Once set to Verified, it is very important to then request a mentor review.
Now to talk about the technical competency reporting. Since the competencies you are working on towards have already been agreed upon by your organization and CPA Ontario in a pre-approved program, the technical competency section will automatically populate with the target proficiency, as you can see circled on the screenshot. As you can see from the screenshot, the target proficiency has been set to a level 1. All you have to do is self-assess your proficiency level against each competency on the map. Here you can see that the candidates self-assess themselves at a level 1. I encourage all of you to really evaluate and be critical when considering your proficiency level. Consider the concept of progression and how the program is designed such that you attain the target proficiency levels progressively by the end of the 30 months. Once CPA Ontario reviews the report, the profession assessed proficiency will be populated. You can use the blue information icon to the right-hand side for more guidance of what a level 0, 1, and 2 mean in the context of the individual sub-competency areas. When you're doing your self-assessment and reflecting as to where you are proficiently with the technical and enabling competency, consider the levels. We expect to see progression. As such, we do not expect a CPA student to have all 4 level 2s achieved within their first year. Generally speaking, we typically see the following progression within the same role. 1 level 2 within the first 6 to 9 months, 2 level 2s at the 12-month mark, 3 level 2s after the 18-month mark, and 4 level 2s around the 24 to 30-month mark upon being ready for qualification. It is important to show the progression when you're aiming to meet the requirements over the 30-month period. Progression also may be quite different if you're changing roles within different pre-approved programs with different depths and technical competencies. If you're changing programs, it is important that you sit with your mentor for the new program and determine how to integrate your already acquired competencies and work on the remaining ones to get to the finish line. Your progression may then be different, and you may not be able to finish your competency requirements at the end of 30 months. Another area where we find students have trouble is with their documentation in the enabling competency requirements. By the end of 30 months, students are required to hit a level 2 in all 5 of the enabling competencies. When reflecting and documenting your responses, I would like to draw your attention to a rubric that is located in the blue question mark icon on the enabling page. This will show you what the reviewers are expecting to see for a level 2 and a format on how to document it so you achieve the level 2 on your first try. For the enabling competencies section, you will need to respond to each of the questions using the specific examples. The questions should be answered such that you are addressing 3 parts. What happened? What was the issue at hand? Is the what question. Then you go on to the so what. What were the implications? Who were the stakeholders? What were the alternatives available, etc.? What were the pros and cons of each alternative? And then finally, the now what. What was the conclusion? Was there a reasonable basis for your conclusion? And most importantly, what did you learn from this experience? An important thing to note is that you do not need to respond to each question every time you meet with your mentor. However, you are required to demonstrate a level 2 proficiency in each enabling competency before you complete your program. It is quite possible that you did not get any exposure to one or few of the enabling competencies during your first 6 or 12-month period, in which case you should leave those enabling competencies undocumented and unassessed for that experience report. Practicing these questions can help you develop strong responses and will also enable your mentor to coach you in the development of your soft skills. A helpful tip would be to think about what you did and use I statements instead of we statements, as this will help the reviewer understand your role in the task performed. On this slide is a screenshot of one of the enabling competency questions. You will be required to write your response in the boxes provided and self-assess your proficiency level. As with the technical competencies, once CPA Ontario has reviewed your report, the profession assessed proficiency will populate. And if the reviewer has any comments on your response and the things that you need to work on, that will be displayed in the reviewer notes. I would like to draw your attention to the blue question mark icon on the top right-hand corner. As you can see here, when you click on the blue icon, there are subcategories to follow in your documentation. To ensure that you have covered everything you can, review the rubric upon documenting your response. We find a lot of students struggle with meeting the requirements of this rubric to achieve their level 2. You should work with your mentor to ensure you're documenting your response to a sufficient acceptable level. We have created the following checklist to help you with your response and documentation of your response. Here, you can see some of the main points we always make sure are covered in a student's response are: identify the CPA value impacted, identify the stakeholders in the situation, provide more than one alternative solution, analyze each alternative, demonstrate pros and cons of each option, ensure that your conclusion is consistent with your analysis, identify what else you can do to further improve your enabling development. After you have self-assessed on all of the technical competencies that are populated in your report and have reported on all applicable enabling competencies, you will click on the Submit button of your report details page. This will change your report status to verified. Please note that this does not mean that anyone has actually approved or verified your report. We will discuss in what instances you send your report to CPA Ontario to have your competencies reviewed at a later time in this webinar. Your report must be submitted and set to verified before you can request a mentor review. Now I will pass it on to Hassan, who will walk you through the process of requesting a mentor review.
Thanks, Raheem. Another best practice tip is to have mentor reviews every 6 months. This will help ensure that you will always be on track to meet the 2 mentor review requirement for every 12 months of current experience. Once your report is set to verified, you will need to request a mentor review. Your mentor will then review what you have documented and discuss with you any issues or concerns or areas where you want to gain progression and advice. Later, they will complete the mentor review in PERT. Let's take a closer look. This slide gives an example of what you should expect to see if you have at least one report in a verified state. To ensure that you understand the process, there are 3 next steps that the mentor has to take once you have requested a review. First, the mentor receives an email that the mentee has requested a review. Second, your mentor will meet with you and discuss your last experience report with you. And lastly, once the meeting has occurred, the mentor will log into PERT, note any significant areas of discussion at the meeting, and mark the mentor review as complete. All CPA students are require a semi-annual mentor meeting or 2 mentor meetings documented in PERT for every 12 months of current experience, as mentioned. It is important to know that if you do not have the minimum number of mentor meetings documented in PERT, you will face a penalty of 1 month of duration for every missed mentor meeting.
Students in a pre-approved program are only required to submit their profession assessment to CPA Ontario when they're either leaving the program or ready for completion. Please note that leaving the program means you're either switching lines of services or business departments or a different rotation within your employer, or most times even switching office locations. If you have done either of these, you should create a change of job assessment. If you're not sure, you should reach out to your program manager to confirm. Every time you change your job or you're required to report this to CPA Ontario so that we can assess your competencies achieved from your previous job. It is important to do this in a timely manner, as sometimes you may think you're at a level 2, but really the examples and documentation may not support this. Or in the case of technical competencies in a pre-approved program, you may not have had enough duration and progression in the role to support a level 2. It is important to get this information in ASAP so that you can assess where you are and what areas you need to work on in the future, in your future job to build upon your competencies. We have attached a couple of very handy fact sheets to the handout section and within the resources slide to help you if you require to submit a change of job assessment. To submit a change of job assessment, you have to update your current experience report for the proficiencies achieved for the technical as well as enabling competencies achieved during your time at your current job. Once updated, on the Report Details tab, select Submit. It will go to a verified status. You need to go to the Profession Assessment tab and select Request Assessment. Select the assessment reason of change of employment and indicate that you're no longer employed. Check off the declarations and select Create. Another time that you have to submit a profession assessment to CPA Ontario is when you're ready to qualify. There's quite a bit of work required to make sure your profile and your reports are up to date and at their best response levels to satisfy the exit requirements. The steps that you need to take to submit a completion assessment are, again, update your current experience report for the proficiency achieved for the technical and enabling competencies. Once updated, on the Report Details tab, select Submit. The report will be set to a verified status. Navigate to the Consolidated Summary tab. When you select all the reports and select Assess, this will show you whether you have met all the areas that needs to be met for completion. Go to the Profession Assessment tab and select Request Assessment. For the assessment reason, at the completion mark, you need to select Completion Assessment as your reason and indicate that you have met the practical experience requirements. Check off the declarations and select Create. A few things that you should verify before submission is, do you have 2 mentor reviews required for every 12 months of current experience, and are they reported in PERT? Are your enabling competencies well documented? This is where you compare your response to the enabling competency grid and see if you have met the requirements for a level 2 response in each and every one of the enabling competencies. Have you included your leave time? And do you have any overlapping dates in your experience reports? As mentioned, when you are at completion or when you leave the requirement, you should be requesting a profession assessment through PERT. Here on the screenshot, you can see that this candidate has requested an assessment. Once you have requested an assessment, an automatic email is sent to your program leader, prompting them to review and approve your experience. When the assessment is with the program leader for review, the assessment status will indicate certification requested. When the program leader has signed off on the experience, the status will change from certification requested to assessment requested. This means that CPA Ontario has received the assessment request and it will be assigned to a reviewer shortly. This is what your profession assessment page will look like once your program leader has signed off on your experience. This assessment would now be sent to CPA Ontario for our review and approval. When CPA Ontario assigns the assessment to a reviewer, the status will be updated to required. This does not mean that any action is required on your part, but rather just means that the assessment is currently with CPA Ontario awaiting a review. It takes us 4 to 6 weeks for the initial review of the assessment, and the assessment status will say follow-up if the reviewer has any follow-up questions for you. You are required to address the reviewer comments and resubmit the profession assessment if the assessment was put into follow-up. Once we review your reports, we may send you revisions to complete, and that is when the assessment will go into follow-up. Once we have approved your report, we will send you instructions on how to apply for membership. For students in an external audit program, remember that there is one additional layer of requirement from you. You must meet the public accounting licensure requirements. For external audit students, these requirements are, firstly, your chargeable hours included within the 30-month work term. You need to gain a minimum of 2,500 chargeable hours, which should consist of at least 1,250 chargeable hours of assurance, of which a minimum of 625 hours must be attained in the audit of historical financial information. At least 100 hours needs to be in review procedures, and 100 has to be obtained in taxation services. Another requirement for public accounting licensure is all the chargeable hours has to be obtained under the overall supervision of a licensed public accountant from Ontario. This is usually the pre-approved program leader for your program. Additionally, the maximum secondment time for external audit students is 6 months. The reason for this is because students need at least 24 months under the supervision of a licensed public accountant and an external audit program to certify under the external audit program requirements. So, what are your next steps? You need to take the required steps to be set to in progress in PERT if you haven't done so already. Ensure that you're on site with your mentor reviews and have planned out your next step for future reviews. If you're in a co-op role, the best practice is to have a mentor review at the end of your co-op term if you are in PERT. You should watch the Enabling Competency video tutorial to assist you with the Enabling Competency documentation in your future reporting. Also, take advantage of the available resources on our CPA Ontario website. Here are some very useful links and resources available to you that are located on the CPA Ontario website. If you navigate on the website to become a CPA Ontario section, then to complete your designation and then select practical experience, all of your resources and information are located on this page. Please note that we will open the floor to questions at this time. Beth, are there any questions that have come in?
Yes, thank you, Farheen. That was an absolutely fantastic and thorough webinar. We had a few questions which were answered throughout the webinar, but there's been a few about the difference between reporting while you're in a co-op and reporting when you're permanent. So I'm wondering if you could answer the question, what should I be reporting if I'm in a 4-month co-op term or if I'm in an 8-month co-op term in regards to the 6-month mentor review requirement or the 2 mentor reviews within every 12-month requirement? Could you touch on that a little bit?
For sure. So for all of you co-op students out there, if you are, best practice is to get into PERT when you start your employment in a co-op term and start reporting in PERT right away. So if you are in PERT and you're reporting your co-op experience, you would want to do a separate report, experience report for each co-op term. So you would do a separate report for your first 4-month co-op term and another report for your next co-op term. Again, it's best practice to have a mentor review at the end of your co-op term so that you know what your next steps are and where you are in the assessment process. Before leaving the firm or the organization that you are having the co-op term with, I would strongly recommend that you self-assess on your experience report and have a mentor review and have it documented in PERT before you leave the organization to go back to school.
Thank you, Farheen. We have a similar question. So this student knows they're returning to their pre-approved program after being at school. Should they be submitting a change of job? What should they be doing in this situation?
That all depends on your organization or firm's practices. If you are returning back to school, but you know that you will be back at your firm or your organization for a second co-op term, and if they have enough space on the roster, you're not required to submit a change of job assessment at this time. You can stay on your firm's pre-approved program and continue your reporting. However, again, I would strongly recommend to do an experience report and have your mentor meeting before you go back to school. Also, you should touch base with the program manager of your pre-approved program to understand whether they require you to submit a change of job assessment or if they are okay with you staying on their roster for the second co-op term that you would be returning to.
Thank you, Farheen. And then a sort of related question, I guess. When submitting for completion, you mentioned you have to check whether you've done the 2 mentor reviews and that everything's up to date. But what do I do if I didn't document something back in 2017? What are my options?
So that could be a couple of different scenarios. Maybe you were having mentor meetings with your mentor, but you did not document it in PERT. Or you were not having your mentor meetings at all. If you were having the mentor meetings in PERT, I would suggest that you would still request a mentor meeting and work with your mentor to get that past mentor meeting documented and what exactly the discussion was at that point in time. If the meeting was not documented on a timely basis, the likelihood is that you will still face a penalty of 1 month for every mentor meeting not documented. But it is best to disclose to the reviewer what meetings have happened, and the reviewer will make a decision at that time when they are reviewing your assessment on what the penalty should be based on the circumstances.
Thanks, Farheen. Okay, so we have a question here about prior experience. I'm just trying to sort of decipher it. Can you talk a bit about, is there any difference between a prior experience report and a current experience report? So in this situation, the student has created a prior experience report, and the question is, do I need to do a self-assessment? Then what do I do now that I've created a prior experience report?
Okay, so the first step would be the difference between the prior experience report and a current experience report is basically separated by the per effective date. That's the date that you've been confirmed into the program and you have a mentor on your PERT profile. So any time accumulated before that date is considered prior experience, and you can go back up to 5.5 years prior to your per effective date. But you can only claim a maximum of 12 months of prior experience within that period. So you would still need to complete a self-assessment on the prior experience report, going through the technical competencies and the enabling competencies, but only the ones that you feel were relevant during that period of time covered in that experience report. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
In terms of assessment, a prior report would pretty much be assessed the same way as a current experience report. You would still self-assess yourself against the map. Your assessment would still have to be reviewed by your program leader. And then when the assessment comes to us, we would take a look at the entire program and what competencies were supposed to be achieved during that time. So the process would be very similar in terms of assessment for a current experience versus a prior experience. The only difference would be that your prior experience, you are limited to 12 months, as Hassan mentioned.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a few questions here about leave. So this particular student has asked for leave taken to write the CFE. Does this deduct from the 30 months, or is there a leave allowance? And I think that also expands to the question of what is leave, what should I be reporting as leave, and what is not counted as leave if there is anything that's not counted, and how much leave allowance, sorry.
So all CPA students are allowed up to 20 weeks of leave within the 30-month duration. As long as you're within the 20 weeks, that will not impact your duration, i.e. you do not have to do any additional duration for that leave. If you go above the 20 weeks, that will extend your duration by the amount of excess leave over the 20 weeks. Now to the question of what is included in the leave, any time that you're not in your day-to-day routine job responsibilities, you're not at work, should technically be included in your leave. So if you are away on professional development courses, you're on vacation, sick time, anytime that you are offsite doing some training courses, that should all be considered as your leave.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then a question about the chargeable hours. So we've got a few questions about chargeable hours. The first one is, when do we upload the chargeable hours form to our experience report?
You should have a chargeable hour report for each experience report that you have in PERT. In terms of the assessment, the profession assessment, you're only required, we will review your chargeable hours when you submit the profession assessment to us. So if you have a change of job assessment or a completion assessment or an assessment after your co-op term, and you're an external audit student, we will require you to attach the chargeable hour form to your experience report when we review the assessment.
And just to reiterate what Farheen said, this is only for external audit students. If you're in a different pre-approved program, you're not required to upload your chargeable hour form.
Thank you. Thank you both. Coming back to, sorry, we've got lots of different questions coming through, so we'll switch around a little bit. This one is about change of job. So a few questions about change of job and how the chargeable hours will count. In this case, a student has switched from a different program to an external audit program. How do my hours count? How do I measure my chargeable hours?
So when you were in a non-external audit program, as Hassan mentioned, you did not need to submit your chargeable hours. There are no chargeable hours that are counted in a non-external audit program. However, during your time in an external audit program, you do need to submit your chargeable hours for that time period. We use the chargeable hours not only to meet the public accounting licensure requirements, but to also review your competency levels, which are directly correlated with your chargeable hours as well. For external audit students, though, especially when we're talking about switching from an outside of external audit program to an external audit program, it is important to note, as I've mentioned earlier, that to qualify from an external audit program, you need at least 24 months in an external audit program. So your duration in an outside of external audit program is limited to less than 6 months. So external audit program students should always be aware of that when switching programs.
And we have a similar question to tack on to that. So this student has come out of EVR into PPR. So do I need to convert my EVR to PPR? How does that work?
So there could be a lot of different scenarios, and I think the student that has asked this question should probably reach out to Practical Experience because there is a lot of different regulations involved when it comes to external audit and from EVR to PPR. For instance, if you're a dual student, you're not eligible for a dual under EVR. If you are transitioning just from an EVR to a PPR, the first thing to do is to assess where you are in the EVR status. What competencies have you already attained, and how you will attain the remaining competencies to get to the finish mark. You might not be able to complete your practical experience requirements within the 30 months because when we map out a pre-approved program at 30 months, the assumption is that the students will be working towards the pre-approved map throughout the 30 months. So if you're going from an EVR and if you're have not been working towards the same competencies, you might not be able to achieve the same results within 30 months that your other peers who've stayed in the pre-approved program for the entire 30-month duration may be able to do so. But like I mentioned, every situation is different. If you are transitioning routes, it is best to meet with your mentor, discuss your integration, and also reach out to Practical Experience if you want to discuss your specific situation.
And that would be the case for prior experience as well. We had a student ask, is this for prior to? Based on your answer there, yes, prior would be considered around the same way you report it, correct?
Yeah, if you mean if the prior is
From a different job.
Yes.
But if the prior is from the same job, same role,
then it's the normal assessment process because they're working towards the same competencies.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a few questions about mentorship. So we have a question about prior experience, which I think will answer a few of your questions out there. So does the requirement to have a mentor review every 6 months also apply to prior experience?
That's a good question. You're not required to have mentor reviews for your up to 12 months of prior experience. The mentor review reporting requirement is only for the duration of current experience. So if you have up to 12 months of prior experience, you do not need to report a mentor review in PERT for that time.
It is worth pointing out to this particular student, it does actually say in the PER that you should have a mentor review as soon as possible when you're reporting prior for that experience. So it's a good idea to have a mentor review for the prior experience and then begin your 6-month regular updates and reviews. But this does answer a question of, is my prior experience reviewed by my mentor? So the answer would be, if you report it close to the per effective date, yes, but it is not required and you will not be penalized for missing that. And then we have another question which does relate quite similarly. Do I need to create a separate report for each mentor review? So to summarize that question in a different way, every 6 months, do I need to create a new experience report and have a mentor review for that experience report? Or do I just have multiple experience reports for the same, multiple mentor reviews for the same experience report?
CPA students have the option of either creating a new experience report every 6 months or updating your existing experience report. So if you're in the same job, same rotation, you don't need to create a new experience report. You can continue to update your current experience report. However, your mentor might have a certain preference as well as your program might have a certain preference. So please connect with your program manager or mentor if they prefer you to do a separate experience report. You might want to work with that preference. But on our end, you have either alternative available to you.
And then a similar question again, with enabling competency reporting. This student was saying they're a little bit confused. Do they need to answer the enabling competency questions every time they update their report? And does this need to be reviewed?
So enabling competencies, you have to attain a level 2 in all of the enabling competencies at the end of your 30-month. However, there is going to be certain periods in time when you don't have exposure to one or multiple of the enabling competencies. If you have not had exposure to a certain enabling competency during that experience report period time, you are not required to self-assess or document that enabling competency for that experience report.
Thanks, Farheen. So I'm just getting a few more questions here. So we're going to switch tracks a little bit and go back to external audit. So this particular student has asked, and it has actually been answered to everyone as well, if you're in an external audit program, is the public accounting license a requirement or optional?
So an external audit program, if you're able to certify from an external audit program and meet all the requirements of external audit, you're eligible to obtain a license when you obtain your membership. That doesn't mean that you are getting your license when you obtain your CPA membership. You're eligible. The next step, if you're interested in public accounting licensure, is to apply for licensure. So in response to the question is that no, you do not have to apply for licensure. Most students do not apply for a licensure because they don't need a licensure right away, but you're eligible if you certify from that program.
Thank you. And that's exactly what is said in the message sent out to everyone else. And then we had a good question, which I thought would be good for everyone. And a very good question, the student that sent us in. How do I connect with my program manager? I don't know who they are. So what do you do if you don't know who your program leader or managers are? Program manager or leaders are.
So as students of a pre-approved program, your mentor should be able to assist you with that. Different organizations work differently. If you're in a large organization, your program manager might not always be able to be there to assist you. But in those cases, usually the mentor should be able to answer your questions. So my recommendation would be to talk to your mentor about your questions, and they should be able to direct you further.
Thank you. And then I guess this one more come through about the enabling competency. So I was going to follow up to your question before. Once you hit level 2 for enabling competency, do you have to continue answering these questions again, whether you're the 6-month or the 24-month mark?
You do not have to continue answering it if you have attained the level 2 already. However, if you did have exposure to that certain competency and it shows progression in your enabling competencies, it is recommended that you do so. The more practice you get in responding to those questions, it will also help you in the other enabling competencies. But if you didn't have any exposure to it, or if the exposure wasn't in a progressive manner, then you don't need to answer it again.
Thank you, Farheen. And I think one more question that we can have you answer. We'll just come back to the leave allowance. We have had a few more questions about that. But this one is, what if your leave is a significant amount of leave, say maternity leave, long-term disability or sickness? What if you're taking 6 to 12 months off, taking a break per se?
So if you're taking a break, and it is a long-term break, let's say more than a few months, you should definitely do a change of job assessment and assess where you are in the meeting and moving towards the practical experience requirements. You should also reach out to us to see what can be done in your specific scenario. There's specific currency requirements such that you have to obtain all your practical experience within the last 7 years of your completion date. And for external audit students, that's within the last 5 years of your completion date. So we might need to consider your specific situation. Also, in regards to your CPA registration date, the student registration date, you need to finish the entire program within 10 years of your registration date. All these currency requirements did have, we kept in mind when we decided the 7 years or the 10 years that students may be taking certain extended leaves, but your situation might be different. So you should definitely reach out to practical experience if you are in that situation, so that we can consider all the different timelines and how they would apply to you.
Thank you very much, Farheen. So we have 10 minutes left until 1 o'clock. However, we can see the questions are slowing down. So I will officially end the audio version of this webinar. I would like to give a special thank you to Farheen and Hassan for being absolutely fantastic presenters for today. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for taking the time to help these students with their reporting. I would like to thank the Practical Experience team for busily working away in the background, answering all your questions. They were good questions, and they will be remaining on the line for 10 more minutes to privately answer your questions. So send them through. We will be here. Questions will end at 1 p.m. exactly. So if you don't get in time, you can always email practicalexperience@cpaontario.ca. However, we do recommend reviewing the other webinars that we've held. We have had one every month, and we're now starting to repeat these topics. So you may find that your question is answered in a previously recorded webinar. You can find these in the Practical Experience page under webinars and FAQs. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar. I wish you all the best with your reporting, and final thank you.